Hello and good afternoon, and welcome to the panel discussion on circular economy, unlocking value through e-commerce. My name is Vinay Verma, and it is my pleasure to host this panel discussion on the subject today. I head M Junction, which operates digital platforms that connects more than 300,000 businesses to buy and sell to each other across several industries ranging from iron and steel, coal, minerals, agri-produce, many more, and of course, waste. Since our inception in 2001, uh, we have enabled business transactions in excess of 20 billion US dollars on our platforms. And that, as per my friends in media, makes us the largest B2B e-commerce company in India today. I'm joined by a very eminent panel of speakers to introduce this subject to you. And I'm going to now forthwith introduce our panelists for the day today. Sunil, would you please raise your hand? Thank you, Sunil. Sunil is the resident director of Tata Sons for Middle East and North Africa. In his professional career, spanning more than 3 decades, Sunil has held a variety of leadership positions within the Tata Group. And for those who are not very familiar with the Tata Group, that's a business house with revenues in excess of 100 billion US dollars. Our next speaker in the discussion today is Hani. Hani, Hani is a partner and head of sustainability practice at Roland Berger, Middle East. He joined Roland Berger in 2011 and actually established the sustainability practice there. He has been associated with several prestigious projects related to waste management in both the government as well as the private sector space. And moving to our third speaker, third panelist. Our third panelist is Rakhi. Rakhi is a business journalist and a commentator on the steel sector. She has been associated with nearly all the leading business publications in India. So Business Standards, Business Today, Economic Times. She has been associated with all of them. She has a great understanding on the iron and steel industry and this subject in particular. So before we start the discussion, let me make a small confession. I am no expert on this subject, and I say this with all honesty, is that unlike the 3 panelists that we have here today, I am no expert on this subject. But like many of you, and I can see about 73 people have logged in so far, like most of you, I'm deeply concerned, deeply concerned with the way or what is happening to our planet Earth due to the tremendous amount of waste that is getting generated. Because of the way that we produce goods, the way that we sell goods, and the way that we handle the waste, which is the economic model, which has a name now. It is called linear economy. And this waste is actually ending up as landfills and at the bottom of our oceans. This, I'm sure all of you who have logged in here today would agree with me, this is not sustainable. This cannot continue. And it is important that we who are concerned about this planet and who are keen that we and our children have a future on the only home that we have in this entire universe, planet Earth, that something needs to be done. This model, linear economy, needs to change. It needs to change from use and throw to use and recycle or use and return. And that is why, I'm very excited and very keen to talk to the three panelists here today to understand about the subject of circular economy that holds a lot of promise for all of us. So, with this context, I'm going to kickstart a panel discussion by asking or reaching out to Sunil with, my first question. Sunil, you have been associated with Tata Group for more than 3 decades, and that's a business group which is known for its concern to sustainability and society. So I wanted to ask you, how is Tata Group looking at the subject of this, circular economy? Is it important in their agenda? What are they doing about it? So over to you, Sunil.
Thank you very much, Vinay, for inviting me to this panel, first of all, along with my two distinguished co-panelists to share our thoughts on sustainability and circular economy. So before I begin, allow me to briefly give an overview of Tata Group because that will set a context of what we are saying and why we are saying. Um, for those who do not know Tata Group fully, we are a 150-year-old, or I would say, group. And as you know, many companies, brands in the corporate world, very few have survived and thrived for such a long time. We started our journey as nation builders and pioneered many industries and businesses in India. First steel plant in Jamshedpur, first hydro power station in Maharashtra, Khopoli, first insurance company in India, first luxury hotel Taj way back in 1903, first airlines, Air India, and so on and so forth. And today, as my friend Vinay alluded to, we are a diversified conglomerate of about 100 companies with revenues in excess of $110 billion, market cap in excess of $160 billion, 720,000 employees operate all over the world in almost 100 countries. And having businesses in diverse sector like steel, power, automotive, information technology, financial services, infrastructure, aerospace, defense, tourism, travel, consumer and retail, telecom and media. It's often called salt to software company. Tata is known as salt to software company. So the group has evolved, and in the last 20 years, the group has grown its turnover by more than 20 times. And all this has happened while following the very value of sustainability. The group has evolved, transformed continuously in the last 150 years. But there is one thing which has remained unchanged in the last 150 years, and that is the ethos of the group, which stresses on having community at the heart of the business. And I must quote the founder, Mr. Jane Tata, here when he said, in a free enterprise, community is not just another stakeholder in the business, but in fact, the very purpose of its existence. And founders institutionalize this commitment towards society by pledging their wealth to charitable trusts, which today own two-thirds of the equity in Tata Sons, the promoter holding company of the group. So we are therefore somewhat an unusual corporate where 66% is owned by charitable trusts, which are committed to doing good. And therefore, sustainability is at the heart of the business in Tata Group. Long-term value creation, focus on all stakeholders are the essence of our sustainability framework. Good governance, care for customer, care for community, care for employees, care for environment are the key pillars of sustainability. And what Vinay alluded to very nicely, that the traditional linear consumption pattern, which is take, make, dispose, and he said make or reuse, they are coming up against constraints on availability of resources. And therefore, we can say that the future of business is circular, where today's goods are tomorrow's resources, forming probably a virtuous cycle that fosters prosperity in a world of finite resources. So, with these thoughts, with a general view on Tata and sustainability, I think I'll stop here and listen to other viewpoints and take up this issue again later in this conversation.
Thank you, Sunil. Thank you very much for sharing, the history of the Tata Group and the role that it has played, a vital role that it has played towards nation building. And it is no surprise that since this is a business group that has community at the center of what they do, sustainability is a big and important subject there. There's a huge amount of diversity in this group, salt to software, as you mentioned. And I'm going to get back to you later in the panel discussion to ask you whether this diversity that you mentioned in terms of presence in so many different sectors, that gives an advantage or it has its own set of challenges to embark on the sustainability agenda for the group. So, Sunil, I'll get back to you, on this. But you mentioned about linear economy, and you explained in brief in terms of, the concept of linear economy in terms of, making and, I forget, what you said, more in terms of making and disposing. That's the essence that I got. And since I don't know much about it, and I'm sure our participants will also, be eager to, understand more about it, I'm going to now request Hani to explain to us, what is linear economy? What is the, drawbacks of linear economy? And why should, all of us work towards implementing the agenda of circular economy? So over to you, Annie.
Thank you, Mr. Vinaya, and it's a pleasure to be here, invited by M-Junction, and to also be with this distinguished co-panelist. First, a quick note on Roland Berger, right? So we're a management consulting firm among the top 5 in the world of European origin. We were established in 1967, and since then we really spread almost around the world. Now, to cope with the direction of where the industry is going, where the world should be heading, it's our duty in management consulting to always be ahead of the curve. So the topic of sustainability has always been embedded in our offering. But in our most recent strategy, it became a very core pillar in our offering. And the sustainability is not about one sector or one industry. It's really across the whole world, across the different competences. And we decided intentionally in the Middle East to put a lot of focus on sustainability, because we believe that there is a lot of potential in the Middle East, and I will be explaining a bit later the ambitions and the nice ambitions of the government and pushing those things forward. So we had the chance to work, as you rightfully said in the introduction, with the governments, because they really want to restructure the whole sector. They want to start where the world has reached. And that's a very nice ambition, which I will elaborate a little bit further on. So for today, I prepared some presentation, a very small illustration to reflect the linear economy concept, and also how we move to the circular economy. So I'm hoping that you can see well my screen. What you will realize is that we live in this linear economy, and sometimes we don't know what it is, right? We don't know what is it that we're actually doing. As you can see from this graph, the concept of we're taking the finite resources, as Sunil mentioned, and we're creating a product. Now, to create that product, we are putting a lot of power, manpower, innovation, R&D, logistics, and you name it. A lot of businesses are happening to make sure that that product, let's say plastic or oil, is turned into plastic, and then it becomes a bottle. And then when the consumer takes it, we simply use it, and then we throw it. That linear economy is leading to what we know as waste. But that should not be the case. Now, if we see, what does that mean really when it comes to the waste management? So you have the residential and non-residential who are consuming lots of material, and what you can see is that the collection companies are actually doing the waste management, which is what we know, and they take the waste and they throw it in the landfill. Now that is actually called waste management, but it's done in a linear form, because what it does is it takes the waste, it cleans the street, it cleans the households, and makes sure that everything goes to the landfill, with a very small amount of material being recovered and sent for recycling facilities or for recovery. Now, when we say we want to move to a circular economy, that's when the things change. That's when we close the loop. And in a circular economy, we have to have several steps. So first, we have to rethink the design of our products. We have to rethink the ownership. So why should I own today my car if I can rent it? Why should I own my fridge if I can rent it and end up having waste? And then finally, it's rethinking the material flows. Now, that number 3 is mostly about waste management. And that's where a lot of the countries are actually starting, because it's a missing link. It's something that can be fixed, and still it's not done always in the right way. So if you recall the previous graph, now you will see here how it changes, right? So we moved from a very simple linear economy where the trucks are taking the material and simply sending them to the landfill, to actually the material being sent back to the industry, to cement plants, and even to energy or power under the waste to energy. Now, this is the way where we move from a linear to circular. And you can imagine lots of new elements are into that picture. And you can also see that traceability and the digital world become quite essential. And more importantly, what you will see is that in order to create that coordination between the different stakeholders, you need to start having communication from the different assets. You need to introduce the technology, you need platforms, and this is a good example also when M-Junction is mentioning, trading the material and creating the transparency. This is a fundamental element on how you can move towards circular economy. So to make that picture happen, what we are doing in Roland Berger is supporting on several levels. We're supporting on how to set up the governance, how to change the regulations, how to enable the private companies to go into the right operations, how to introduce technologies, but also how to let everyone be engaged. Because circular economy cannot be done without having every stakeholders from us as individuals living in our households to companies being responsible companies. And as we heard Mr. Sunil talking about the Tata Group, everyone should play a role. And with that, I will just stop for the time being to basically leave the floor for the next topic and also the next iteration.
Thank you, Hani. Thank you for actually explaining what is meant by a linear economy so nicely. And for the benefit of more than 119 participants that we have in this panel discussion today, let me what you call reiterate few of the key concepts that I picked up from what you have just shared. So what I understand is that today most of the industries use resources to make products, and then they sell the products. And in this process, a huge amount of waste gets generated, which is toxic for this planet Earth. That is issue number one. The other issue is that this model is based on the concept that these resources will be around for eternity, which is not the case. The resources are finite. And that is where, circular economy, which lays stress in terms of using less resources, generating less waste, and more importantly, recycling the waste assumes importance. And you touched about the role that digital platforms can play, and that's a very, very interesting subject. I'm personally very curious to know more about it, and so I'm going to get back to you with question in terms of elaborating more on the role that digital platforms can play in terms of enabling the circular economy. I will now move to our third panelist, Rakhi. Rakhi, we know that you interact with industry, and you have a very strong I would say also interaction with policy makers in the country today. So can you share with us that, in your opinion, do the policy makers in India, the industry, are they aware about this subject? Is it anything being done to make the shift towards circular economy happen quickly?
Okay. Thanks. Let me begin by thanking you, Vinay, and the team here, inviting me for this discussion. Joining a distinguished panel is always an honor, and being able to speak about a topic which has over the years become very close to my heart is another privilege. So I thank you for both the opportunities. I would like to begin by saying that the concept of circular economy that seems to be gaining ground now is actually a very sensible strategy, and it was in the making for a number of years. Different industry groups, different corporates were at various stages of awareness and their consciousness levels towards the community, towards climate change, towards reusing raw materials and finished products, recycling. All these concepts were there, but the concept of circular economy is now stitching it all together. So we see a more structured approach. Let me begin by saying that over the course of my interaction with mainly metal sector companies, which I've been covering for the past 2 decades almost, both ferrous and non-ferrous, that is steel and non-steel companies, which is aluminium, zinc, copper, I am noticing a growing incidence of being responsible towards the environment. There's been a sea change in attitude in the last 10, 15 years. And with it, adoption of cleaner technologies, methodologies, processes, and overall a distinct shift in mindset, which is very welcome and which is absolutely necessary in this day and age. Maybe we were moving towards it at a certain pace. With the pandemic raging all over the world, it has only accelerated the whole process. And I think our climate change objectives and goals will now get uh, into greater focus and attention, and we will see a more faster shift towards the circular economy as a whole. This will be across industries. I'm just giving you some examples from metal sector companies. Let's begin by saying, in India, the government is a big force. I mean, even though the steel sector in India is largely deregulated, the government does play a key role, and it has taken a taken a great step in the sense that we have a national steel policy which came out in 2017, which aims at a production of 300 million tons of steel by 2030. We are already number two. We are the second largest producer in the world after China. Between China and India, there's a huge gap, but technically we are number two, and we are aiming to take it to 300 million tons. Out of that, as the government oversees it, they are targeting about 30 to 40% of the steel that will be produced by 2030 should come from electric arc furnace or induction furnaces, which will require a tremendous amount of scrap to be generated, okay, metal scrap. So, with that in view, the government came up with a steel scraps policy, which is to enhance the supply of scrap uh, in in step with the needs that will go up by 2025, 2030 as we approach the target. So, with that, we are now at around 25 million tons of scrap that we generate on our own, and about 7 million tons that we import. The objective is now to reduce the imports and be self-sufficient in generating scrap. That's the whole policy framework for the initial phase, and that would require roughly around 70 to 80 scrap processing centers to come up. Now, these scrap processing centers are where you collect the scrap, you dismantle it, and then process it for use in different industries. So that is a key objective of the government. That is where we are headed towards. Each ton of scrap when you use, they are saying, will reduce your use of iron ore by 1 million ton, and also reduce the use of coking coal by 600 kgs, and 55 kgs of limestone will be less of limestone will be required, so that there's a huge gain. And in terms of energy, about 17-18% benefit. In terms of water, around 40% less use of water, and around 60% less greenhouse gas emissions if you use scrap. So those are the objectives in view. But then there is a huge gap between what we aim for and where we are right now, and that will require a very structured approach in terms of collection and dismantling before we start processing that scrap. So where are these scrap processing centers likely to come up? They are talking about a hub and spoke model, locating them near highways, or locating them near secondary steel units where the access to raw material will be easier. And since we are a growing user of automobiles and white goods, the generation of scrap shouldn't be a problem, because we are already generating a lot of waste material in the sense we are disposing a lot of these appliances. These can come from household, from mills, from automobiles, and generally the obsolescence level is very high these days. People go in for replacement, so generation won't be a problem. The problem is how you get scrap out of these the huge waste that is generated. The reprocessing, the reusing, the redesigning part is very important. So that's where the policy is right now. And obviously industry is urging the government to give them suitable tax breaks when they register with these centers. a lot of material can come from there. So tax breaks are very important. The regulatory framework is there. Pricing is not likely to be an issue according to analysts, because in India we can be a huge processing center, as the processing cost in India is, they're saying per ton it's about $20-30 less than what it is elsewhere in comparable competitive states. So that is where the policy is. And in terms of what the different corporates are doing, I'll restrict myself to mainly metal companies, because that's where I usually interact with. I would say the concept of circular economy is seeping in, and it is visible in every bit of action that they are doing. Let's talk about mines, from where a lot of the integrated steel plants, or integrated producers of aluminium and copper, they start life in the mines. We have seen in the Steel Authority of India mines, a lot of the iron ore that is washed, that water is, it's a very simplistic way. The water that is used for washing, it's taken from a river. That water is again recycled through various processes and made uh, use useful for drinking once more. So it's potable water, and you can technically return the water to the river. It's so clean by the time it is processed and reprocessed again. So that is a standard environmental requirement now. It's wedded to the environment clearance norms. So that is how the circular economy is in motion there. You have the likes of JSW Steel and Tata Steel, two of our largest private sector producers in India, and they are doing a lot of work. Tata Steel has always been a very ethically and environmentally conscious company. They have started using. I was told there's a pilot project going on in the Jharia underground coal mines, where they are using LD slag from the blast furnace to replace sand in the coal mines. So that is another example of circular economy. There would be JSW Steel is, like, they have a plant in Dolvi which they acquired when they bought over Ishpat Industries, and there they have reduced the climate change impact on the coastal region by replanting a lot of mangrove forests, which is over 5,000 hectares in 5 villages, so that land and water erosion is checked. They also do a lot of water conservation in Salem and Vijayanagar, where water is scarce. They do a lot of reverse osmosis, and they try to secure water there. Again, the best example I'm reserving for the last. I take great pride in mentioning this. Very recently, it's only last month that I had a chat with Mr. Satish Pai, who's the CEO of Hindalco Industries, one of our largest private sector aluminum and copper producers. And Satish Pai was very thrilled to inform us, and we did a story on that, saying that Hindalco has become the first aluminium company in the world to achieve 100% utilization of red mud, which is bauxite residue. Because they're an aluminium company, they do a lot of bauxite mining. They generate about 4 to 5 million tons of red mud every year. Hindalco has gone into an arrangement with a group company, with a Aditya Birla group company called Ultratech, which is a major force in the cement industry. And they are now supplying 1.2 million tons of red mud annually to Ultratech's 14 plants across 7 states in India. So with that, they have achieved 100% utilization of the red mud that they generate. They will also supply to a lot of other cement companies. They are talking to about 40 different cement companies. And in cement industry, red mud goes as an input material, whereas it's a waste in aluminium sector. It goes as an input in the cement industry, where 3% less of clinker use is mandated because of the use of red mud. And they can also do a lot of laterite mining can be done without, so that they can conserve a lot of raw materials there. And cement is a classical example. Again, the steel industry is also helping, in terms of recycling the waste. They are using a lot of LD slag in Jharkhand, which is Tata Steel's home state. Jharkhand government allows use of LD slag in road building. So Tata Steel has done a lot of work in under the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana scheme, where LD slag is utilized in road building. These are all, I'm talking of examples of circular economy at this level. But Then there are the likes of ArcelorMittal, which acquired Tata Steel and set foot in India earlier this year. ArcelorMittal, only yesterday you must have seen Aditya Mittal, who's the CFO, uh, Aditya's statement saying that they are going in a very big way towards carbon neutral technologies, and their aim is to make it a zero waste company by 2050. By 2030 they want to reduce carbon use by 30%. With that, they are introducing pilot technologies in their Hamburg plant, where they want to use hydrogen in DRI. But more important, they are focusing on traditional blast furnace technologies, which is the mainstay of steelmaking in India too, where they are saying that we are ready with commercial scale projects, which we will start in by 2022. This has a lot of hope. I mean, they're trying to tinker with the traditional technology to realize carbon neutral steelmaking technologies, which will capture
So,
carbon
Rakhi,
capture
this is
storage.
very interesting. This
So
is very interesting.
yeah, I'll just quickly wrap up. I think I'm
Sure.
exceeding my time here. Just so these are things that I wanted to share with you, because I find that all those learnings will come into India. And very interestingly, Tata Steel again, because I want to share this example, they are thinking of ways to utilize the pile of scrap that is in their scrapyard, and they can take a lot of lessons from their plant in South Wales with Tata Steel UK operations, where they have a dedicated unit for reusing packaging steel. So the steel recycling loop is completed. So they have it within the family, within the Tata Steel network, learnings from there, which they want to bring to India. So all these things are happening in industries across India. Even if the secondary units are trying their best to tie up with automotive companies which are using a lot of aluminum. So aluminum secondary producers, they are tying up with automotive. These are all examples of circular economy in a very small way. Maybe we are beginning, but generally the feeling that I have is that the awareness is very strong, the commitment is there. It's just a matter of time before it gains momentum, and people understand this is the need of the hour, because this is a more than it's more than a business need. It's a question of survival. So if you
Thank
want
you,
to
Rakhi.
do that.
These are very interesting examples, and I'm sure that 117 participants who have logged in to this panel discussion would be benefited, by getting to know such examples, and I'm sure they would find areas for applying these concepts in their own industries. So it's also very heartening to know that there is now a deep appreciation and commitment towards sustainability, not only by the policymakers, but also by industry. And the example that you gave about recycling, it makes a lot of business sense in terms of reducing cost for the steel manufacturers and using less of the resources which are there. So, and you mentioned that, okay, for this to be done, an ecosystem needs to be created, and that is something interesting. And I'm going to be asking Henny for that in terms of, how to build that ecosystem. And also, when you touched about the recycling, I think we need also some focus. And once again, I'll go to Henny for that in terms of make and use and return, that is something that that model also requires focus. But before that, I would like to go back to Sunil. Sunil, we talked about the diversity in the Tata Group. On one hand, we have companies like Jaguar Land Rover. On the other hand, we have Tata, beverages. What a range of industries. And my question to you is that does that make the agenda of sustainability at a group level challenging or easy? If there are any good practices that these companies are doing that you would like to share, that will be very useful. Sunil, I think you have to put your microphone on. I can't hear you.
Yeah, can you hear me
Yeah,
now?
yes, now. Thank you.
So thank you, Vinay, and thank you, Hani and Raki, for a very insightful presentation and brief you have given about what's happening on the circular economy front. Uh, yes, indeed, Vinay, coming to your question, Tatas are very, very diverse companies. And if I may, in a very short respond to the advantages and disadvantages of being so diverse, I think prior to 1990, uh, diversification uh, was was a problem for Tata Group. It is still, but we have overcome that problem to a great extent and converted it into a strength for us because different companies were operating in different environment. And there is a very interesting story. Once Mr. Ratan Tata went to meet some investors in Hong Kong, and he took seven of his senior Tata leaders along with him in that meeting. And this was in early 90s. And when they introduce themselves, they pull out all different kinds of visiting card. Some Tata Steel red and someone blue, someone writing Tata in one way, someone writing in Tata in another way. And the investors asked us, do you all belong to same group or you work in different families? And that struck us very, very hard. And I think after that, Mr. Tata started his journey of unifying the group, journey of bringing common threads across the group, which is Tata Business Excellence Model, Tata Code of Conduct, Tata the T logo, which became a common unifying theme. So it is today indeed a strength. Coming back to how do you implement or how do you see sustainability in different business? I think that's a great strength because uh, in different industries we see different kind of examples, and these are giving different kinds of benchmark to for others to emulate. So I think today we are learning a lot from diversity of the group. And I would like to share some of the live examples of how sustainability is working in different Tata organizations, or how circular economy is working in different Tata organizations. And first example is from Jaguar, our premier automobile brand, Jaguar Land Rover, where many models are made of aluminium body, and Raki also talked about aluminium body. So this company embarked on a project called Reality, which aims to recover aluminium from used Jaguar Land Rover vehicles and reform it into a new high grade aluminium to make new vehicles. And Jaguar Land Rover, in this process, in the last 7, 8 years, have been able to do this very consistently. In the last 6 years, around 300,000 tons of closed loop scrap, which is equivalent to about 1.5 years of new aluminium requirement. They have processed it back in the system. And as a result, the Jaguar Land Rover has already been able to reduce its manufacturing operating CO2 by 46% per vehicle. And in addition, again, as said, that recycling of aluminium requires 95% less energy than primary aluminium production. So this is a very good example of how circular economy is working. I wanted to give you yet another example, but I think my previous speaker, Raki, has spoken about it, how Tata Steel which is producing about 10 million tons of crude steel in its Jamshedpur facility, has been able to use the blast furnace and LD slags for land filling, for using it in place of sand in Jharia, like she said, or for making roads, or even for making cement. And very recently, Tata Steel has introduced a new way of making slag, which is called ground granulated blast furnace slag. And this has the potential to replace the traditional OPC cement to the extent of almost 70%. So steel is doing a lot of work in this area, trying to make fly ash bricks for use in the construction. And we see that lot of companies, not only in metal sector, but other sectors all over the world, they are investing heavily in shifting from take, make, dispose pattern to transform traditional waste to more productive usage. The third example I wanted to share with you, which is from a very different industry, and this is from our Tetley tea factory in Eaglescliffe, UK, which earlier used to send all its packaging waste. They generate huge amount of packaging waste for landfill. The company, sometime in 2008-9, took an ambitious target. And then since 2012, they have achieved zero waste to landfill. No waste is going for landfill. And just to give you a sense, at the start of zero to landfill change, there were three main type of wastes from manufacturing. There was general waste, there was mixed recycling waste, and there was waste related to cardboards and all that. And they made a huge technological change in the types of materials, in the manner in which the waste is being segregated, used. And today, the factory sends around 10% of all waste through reuse route, almost 74% through recycle route, and 16% through energy recovery route. Not only that, the waste tea bags, which have not made it into the final product, finished product, are put through a shred process and reintroduced in the tea blend in a small percentage. Very innovatively, they have found that tea dust can be used as animal feed also. So apart from cost avoidance of waste disposal, there are also rebate benefits for these initiatives. And we have started seeing these coming into developed economies. I don't know whether the examples of such rebates are available in India. We should check with the panelist at some point of time. And finally, Vinay, I wanted to give a very innovative example of developing a new technology-based business model to provide an innovative, efficient, transparent supply chain system which aims to transform one industry's waste into the feedstock for other industry. And you know that this example is from M Junction. And since Vinay, you are here, I won't like to talk about it. May I request you to, share this innovative business model, which is helping industry to manage their waste. How do you do that? How technology is helping? Give us some insight, and then we can go to other questions.
Thank you, Sunil. Three great examples from three industries which would be, as diverse as automobiles, steel, and beverages. And it's very clear that the diversity of the group is a huge advantage in terms of picking up best practices from one industry and applying it in other industry. So very, very useful. And frankly, I wasn't aware that M Junction is also playing a role in circular economy. But now that you mention it, it's true that for the last several years, through one of our platforms called Value Junction, we help companies which have waste to connect with companies which use this waste for recycling, for processing, or as their input material. And over the last several years, we have helped in terms of companies finding buyers for their used oil, for their fly ash, and our team has developed several solutions around it, so that this waste of one industry can be processed by another industries efficiently. The connections are frictionless, and the price discovery which is required also happens seamlessly. And so thank you for bringing this out. I wasn't aware, but it makes me feel good to know that in a small manner M Junction is also playing a role in terms of furthering the agenda of circular economy. But I'm conscious of time, so I quickly go back to Henny. Henny, I have lots of questions for you. From what I heard Rakhi and what I heard Sunil say. But let me ask you the first question in terms of what is the role that you see in terms of digital platforms, in terms of helping circular economy. And if time permitting, I would also like to elaborate more about the use and return model, okay, which is also a key element of circular economy. So over to you, Henny.
Thank you. Thank you. As my colleagues have mentioned, I want to stress something very important, and that's to your point, Sunil, as well. When we start talking about sustainability, we should eliminate the mindset that this is CSR and we're burning money and we're just helping only the environment for the sake of helping. Circular economy is, as Sunil mentioned it, is a business model, right? It's a way of thinking. And the fundamentals of circular economy is balancing between the economy and the ecology. So both from a government point of view and from a private sector point of view should benefit from the circular economy, unlike many solutions that have been proposed in the past. And like rightfully mentioned, the concept of circular economy has always been there, but just putting it together was what was missing. Now, to answer you the point on the digital platforms and their role. In waste management, the biggest problem is the lack of transparency. If you don't have data, you are basically crippling every stakeholder in the market. So the first purpose is to make sure that data becomes available. And the moment data is available, the first thing that can happen is that from a policymaker, regulator, or licensor, you now have enough data in order to know what to steer the market to, right? So you know what to focus on, how to set the policies, what kind of revisions you require. That's the first benefit. Now, the second benefit, and I'm still talking here from a governance or from a government point of view, is the fact that you can start monitoring the waste flows. Now, why is that very important? It's very important because most of the countries, they care about their localization, in-country total value add, they call it, right? And especially here in this region, you hear it quite a lot. So if you want to maximize the localization effect, if you want to avoid the leaks, you want to know from the source all the way to the trade what's really going on. And more importantly, you want to open windows for the different stakeholders to trade formally without the cash, which will increase also the transparency through platforms. The moment you do that, the trade becomes an enabler of the economy and not really a hindrance of the economy. If you do it the informal way, if you do it the scavenging way, then what you're doing, you're really making the country lose the value. Then, if we move on to other stakeholders, if we think of the businesses, such platforms enable the business plan. Because if you want to go today to any of the countries, in most of the emerging countries where the waste sector is not really well established, how would you really put your business plan together? And that's a challenge we know, because as consultants, we're always called for that. So you enter to a country, you don't know what's your starting point, what are the real values, what's being accessible and what's not accessible, and what's being traded or what not. The moment you move to a platform basis is the moment you start attracting FDIs and international companies to come and participate, because now they're coming on basis that they are sure of. And more importantly, or I would say equally importantly, are the citizens. So the people should also know what's going on. The moment you move to platforms, you can use that as a good communication route to raise awareness, to send messages, etc. So what I'm discussing here, or what I'm describing, is a holistic platform, which governments are actually trying to push for in the region, and we definitely encourage them to do so. And where the different elements from the different companies, such as yourself, can really link in and secure that wealth of data that can enable all the different stakeholders in the market. So that's kind of the logic or the principle that we are following, or we are thinking of and pushing, because that's the way where, the examples from India, or the examples specifically from the Tata Group, you can realize that the moment you have that source or that raw data is the moment you can really push things forward. So I hope that mostly answered your question.
Yes, thank you, Hani. And I think Rakhi also brought out very clearly that there is a change in the mindset, and sustainability is no longer being looked as a CSR agenda, but it holds value for the business, and this has given rise to new models. And digital platforms can actually act as a catalyst to bring about the transformation to circular economy from linear economy quickly. So I am not sure, but there are two things. Either as moderator I have not managed to keep time well, or the subject is so interesting that we have not budgeted enough. And I think both the two reasons are true. Nevertheless, we would take a few questions, and I can see lots of questions in the chat box here. And Dr. Oliver has asked this question. I'm going to read out this question. This question is to you, Annie. It says, the question is, based on your experience of working across the globe, what are the best practices that Indian industries and government could adopt? And Hani, I would like to add, we know that you are working closely with the governments in Middle East, and we also know that the government in Middle East have been pioneers in terms of as far as the subject is concerned. So request if you could elaborate on this, respond on this.
Definitely, that's a very interesting question, and yet a little bit complex to answer in one shot, but I will give it my best. So if you look at the elements of a proper governance or a proper waste sector, you need to really put all the elements together. First of all, you need to ensure that the governance is very clear. So who's the policy maker, who's the regulator and licenser, who's the inspection company or the inspection body that's looking into the waste, and who's the operator. Now, the operator could be a wide range of things. You can have a national company, which is kind of the state-owned enterprises that are being pushed here in the Middle East, or you can have the more European model where you have individual companies and they all fit into that system. That would be the first element to consider. The second element that you should really take care of is the tariff management and the gate fee systems. So you would look here into all the elements that allow you to have financially viable models. So you cannot have, at the end of the day, some facilities The example of the metal was great because the metal by itself could be a B2B business and could be profitable. But the moment you move to municipal solid waste is the moment you realize that your operating cost could be higher than your returns. So to do the right thing here, you have to also calculate what kind of gate fees should be there and what kind of tariff should be imposed, but at the same time, who should pay for it? So here is where you can think of, okay, do I have the extended producer responsibility? So the polluter pay concept, basically, so whoever is manufacturing or importing products should look at it. Or do I have a tariff on the citizens? So every household should pay and how they should pay based on their consumption, etc. So lots of variables that come into play when it comes to the tariff itself. And the third topic becomes the operation and what is the choice of technology? Because what works in India will not probably work in the Middle East and will not probably work in the US or Russia or anywhere in Europe, right? So the selection of the operation and the technologies should be thought of in a cluster way. So Sunil mentioned the input of one company, the output of one company is the input of the other. That kind of mindset is required. And you can imagine that if you just let it be, just randomly putting the different companies together, this will not fit in. So you need a structured view, a holistic view of saying, this is how the sector should play. And the final element, and I'm not trying to be holistic, but just covering the most basic, is you need the citizens to be a stakeholder. So you cannot say that there is the citizens and then there is the waste sector. No, all of us, each individually here, have a responsibility to play. And without us holding that responsibility, no matter what we try to do, especially in the municipal side, we are not going to reach the ultimate goal. Right? So we need to participate in sorting at the source. We need to enable the activities and the initiatives that are happening from the sector, and that's the only way to happen. So while this is broad, and I hope, Dr. Oliver, I am answering some of your questions here, or some elements of your question, this is the kind of framework that you would typically try to follow to tick the boxes in order to reach the strong operating model at the country level.
Thank you, Hani. And I'm sure, Rakhi, who's listening, would also, take these best practices to the various, policy makers that she frequently interacts with. So, ladies and gentlemen, I respect and value your time. We have exceeded the scheduled time by about 2 minutes. So we will, bring this panel discussion to a close now. I think Hani made a very nice statement, which personally appealed to me, that we are all citizens and we are all part of, have business responsibility for our business. And this is a subject which makes sense to, both, the roles that, we perform. And I'm sure that this short panel discussion has helped us to understand the subject better and to energize each of the 119 participants who logged in for this discussion to further the agenda of circular economy, both in our capacity of aware and educated citizens, as well as, industry leaders. So thank you very much, the participants, the audience, and the three panelists. Thank you for your time and thank you for sharing, your thoughts and insights on this interesting subject.
Thank you. Pleasure was ours. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sunil.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rakhi. Thank you, Ali. There are still some questions, and we will endeavor to respond to those questions in a day or two by reaching out to the panelists. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thanks.
Take care.